Well, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm McKenna Yarbrough. I'm the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast Regional Director for Best Friends Animal Society. Today's town hall is Making the Case for a New Tomorrow. We'll be talking about how 2 municipal shelters are leading the way in post-pandemic operations by refusing to return back to status quo. But before we get started, I want to make sure that you've heard about our really cool new industry-focused Best Friend podcast. We are featuring relevant, helpful topics each week. It's filled with a lot of really cool stories, and it's done in such a fun, creative way. Tuesday's episode is titled The Moonshot No-Kill 2025, which it talked about the remarkable progress we've made so far and the strategies around reaching the no-kill 2025 goal. So check it out. It's bestfriends.org/podcast. So before we get started and I introduce everybody, I want to go through some housekeeping items. Everyone is automatically muted for the presentation portion of the webinar so that you don't have to worry about accidentally unmuting yourself. If you have any questions at any point, please type it in the chat box to the right. And questions submitted through the chat box are only visible on our end, so you don't have to worry about that. And we may pause a few times through the presentation just to answer some of the questions if it's relevant to the topic that we're discussing at the time. We do have time at the end to go through any additional questions that we may not have covered in the presentation. So keep an eye on the chat box. It's a great place for us to put links to resources, and we'll also post those resource links on the section on the town hall webpage sometime tomorrow, so you'll be able to have access to those then as well. Please note this webinar is being recorded and it will be available after the session on our website tomorrow. Finally, we will be asking you all at the very end to fill out a short survey. And the survey is for us to gather information on some potential content for upcoming webinars. So we ask that you please fill it out and let us know what you might want to learn about. So here we go. I'm going to introduce our 2 panelists today. First is Alexis Pugh. She is the director of the Memphis Animal Services in Tennessee. Welcome, Alexis. And the second person is Scott Trebatoski, I got it right, and he is the Department Director for Hillsborough County Pet Resource Center in Tampa, Florida. Welcome, guys. How are you guys doing today?
Great,
There's
you.
Scott. Scott, you're muted. There we go.
Hi.
Hello, Alexis.
Hi, everybody.
So Scott, we're going to jump right in with you. So we're talking a lot, obviously, today about programs and policies that you and others have implemented that you want to keep permanent. So let's jump right in. What programs and policies that you developed or changed due to COVID-19 that you're planning on keeping and making permanent?
Well, I think the one challenge that we had is we were forced into making policy changes that we really didn't know what to do with, but then they started to evolve into a thought of, this is not a bad way to do business. And we sat down as our state was going to phase 1 reopening, and I sat down with my county administrator and I said, here's what I'm thinking we want to do to reopen. And he looked at me and he said, well, how's it been working since we shut down? And I said, it's been working great. I said, there's a lot of changes, but people are adjusting and things seem to be looking up for us. And he said, well, what do you think shelters will look like 5 years from now? So I explained my vision 5 years from now, and he said, we're not going to open any other way than what you think it's going to look like 5 years from now. So we are ready to go all in. There's not a program that we have that we've been testing that we are not planning on keeping. And I think there are some that we have in our mind that haven't been rolled out yet, but will be rolled out during this process. So we are not going to be shy. We know we're going to take some lumps because we're going to be way outside the box, but hopefully we can be the test case for anybody else who wants to try new things.
Well, let's get into details. Like, what are those programs that you were forced to kind of start for COVID-19 and that you are planning on keeping?
So one of the first things we did was online adoptions and curbside pickups and offering delivery to people who didn't want to come and pick up the animal. And it's something that I had suggested to the county 2 years ago, and they were very uncomfortable with us driving out to people's places. So it got put on the back burner, but it's been super successful. We've had about 100 adoptions take place that way. Then we basically cleared our entire shelter out through foster homes, and our rate of placement is about 90 to 95% of all those animals have been placed. Some have been kept by foster, but some we've played the facilitator of foster to a new adopter. And we put the two together. You know, people generally don't want to have people show up at their house, so we have them show up here at the shelter. We work as a facilitator. We kind of build this great little one-on-one relationship, step back and let things happen. And the greatest part of it is almost every single foster person wants to stay in contact with the new adopter, which sort of takes us out of having any obligation to work through problems because they work it together and we're always there to be that support for them.
Great. And did you change any of your intake policies as well?
Yeah, so we basically shut our intake down, except for emergency and, you know, urgent needs. So if the animal needed to be protected from a person, or if the animal was somehow injured or needed urgent care, that's all that was coming in. If people were finding strays, we would ask them to hang on to the stray. What could we do to help them? Kind of coached them on how to use Nextdoor. We've got an online tool where they can print found posters. Told them to go tack some of those up around their neighborhood because odds are that pet is only a couple blocks from home, and the best way for it to get home is going to be to stay in the neighborhood. And you know, we always said, hey, if after 3 days or so this hasn't worked, give us a call back. And what we typically have found is people don't want us to come get it. They want to know if they can continue to keep it after the 3 days. And a few of them have decided that if they don't find the owner, it's going to become their pet. So it's definitely something we would have never anticipated. You know, our intake over the March through now is down about 2,000 animals, but you're not seeing any stray packs of animals. You're not seeing any of the problems that everybody would have thought you would see. And I think that's where the county administrator and I said, well, wait a second, if we stop taking in 2,000 animals and there aren't problems on the streets of Hillsborough County, what's going on and why can't we keep it this way?
Talk a little bit also about your community cat program that you're looking at changing some of that as well, aren't you?
Yeah, so I just had a meeting with our biggest cat rescues, and they've really been tremendous because we pretty much shut cats down right as we were going into the peak of kitten season. And you know, we have a partner shelter here in the Humane Society, and they've picked up some of that burden, but the majority has been picked up by the rescues. So I got on with them after talking with my administrator, and we decided to talk about how do we make this work moving on. You know, we'll take in those real tough emergencies and we'll be that quick stopping point. So if someone wants to drop it off here and you guys pick it up before the close of business, you know, we can play that role. We just don't intend on being a permanent location for thousands of cats anymore. And they have been really good about saying, you know, if you can provide us some support, you can provide us some equipment. You can get us access to affordable vet care, and you can help us with whatever vet care we can help. They're willing to try it, to the point where are even talking about possibly building a cat shelter that we'll let them use as a central adoption point if they want to do things beyond what they're doing right now, and have a nursery and have incubators and some of those things. So I talked to the county administrator today and said, I'm talking probably six-figure investment in the cat community. And he said, just tell me what you need and tell me why it's going to be better than what we're doing. So,
my goodness, I think we all would like to have that city manager, county manager. That's amazing.
Yeah,
okay,
it was a huge surprise.
It sounds like you really worked well to get the community involved. So what do you envision the role of government agencies to be in this new model?
I see it being radically different than what we've been led to believe is the quote unquote necessary role of government. I see us being that place that will take in sick and injured in emergency, and very possibly some of those behaviorally challenged animals that need some intensive work. I was very fortunate in this last budget year when I went to my Board of County Commissioners and asked for 3 behaviorists, hoping I'd get one, and they gave me all 3. So we have resources that have really helped us. We've gone from 92% live release to 95% live release for dogs, because our behaviorists have been able to dig into those ones that people were hesitant to take before. And so I don't really see our shelter ever opening to 500-600 animals, which is not uncommon for us. We're so confident that that's not going to happen that we've been cutting doors between 2 cages, so that instead of having 1 cage worth of space, we're intending to have all of our kennels have 2 to 3 times as much space, which obviously means our capacity will drop tremendously. But with COVID spacing and some things that we put in place, we have been shooting for like a 25% capacity of what our normal was. And honestly, that's where I think that's where our target capacity will be for these hard luck animals. Everything else will be dealing with rescues, foster homes, and out of shelter care.
So what is the benefit of this model? What is
I think the huge benefit, one, we're de-stressing the animals. The first thing I did during this COVID shutdown was I made all my staff take the time that they were at home and go through fear-free training. So we're all kind of in that mindset. And we all know how a lot of animals just don't do well in the shelter, especially cats. I mean, that's why cats was a big deal to get out. We don't want them to get sick, and we know they get sick, and they hate being in the shelter. You give them a big space and they still go hide in the corner. So, I think it's better for the animal. I think it's better for the community. I think the community feels much more engaged. They also feel like they can control at least a little piece of what's going on, instead of what's secretly going on behind the scenes. Even though we're really a wide open shelter, people always have that thought there's something covert going on. And what it really does is it's going to free up hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of our budget to really reach those animals that need that money. So our wish list of everything we wanted for the next 10 or 15 years is going to be reality, because we're saving so much money not having to care for the animals, even though we're providing some of that care outside by supporting food, medical. It's still cheaper than us having everything being done here. It also is allowing me to repurpose my staff. And if they're not cleaning cages, they can be dealing one-on-one with retention and ownership issues, and those challenges that somebody just would like to have someone to talk to. And we can I like to call them sort of our caseworkers now. At that, you know, you've got a certain caseload, and those are people who are going to call you directly, text you. You know, we've had to invest in laptops with cameras. You know, almost all of our employees are going to have county issued phones so they can text and do things like that without it having to be on their personal phone, because everything is becoming virtual. Before anybody ever gets a chance to step foot in this place, we'll have had multiple virtual contacts with them.
That's great. And so so in all of these changes in regards to community cats or stray animals being picked up, are you having to change any ordinances?
We will eventually have to change some ordinances. I think our ordinances are kind of broadly written, so we're kind of taking that gray area that sits in everybody's ordinance and saying, I think it falls in the gray area, but we're probably legitimately going to want to solidify things. And I'm working on getting some board policies that I have the policymakers actually accept and vote on, so they're not just the policy of my shelter, but they're the policy of this community. And that's a way to concrete the changes into the very fabric of what we're doing, because if it's just a policy of the department, it's too easy to ask that it be changed. But if you've got to go back in front of the Board of County Commissioners, or you've got to do a public hearing to change the ordinance, those are the places you can really cement permanent change.
So tell me something. You had mentioned your save rate was in the mid 90s for dogs. Has this change in programs or operations affected your stats?
It
currently?
definitely has affected our stats because a lot of stuff isn't being done in the shelter. So, you know, that's my next phase of working with our community to make sure as a community we're capturing it all. Ideally, I think every community should have the goal of reporting your data as a community rather than independent entities, because when it all blends together, those numbers will be even better than, you know, for us to have 95% with a 20,000 intake is great. But I bet if we blended in everybody in our community, we're probably up around 98%. And
Right.
our community is not benefiting from the reality of a whole lot more animals are being saved. And one of the things we're also a little lax on is our field people have been returning animals home and, you know, doing all the happy stuff, but they're not entering it into the computer. So we're not getting credit for all that great stuff. So at least we're starting to change the behavior. Now we've got to find a way to account for it so that we can go back and say, this is working and this is how it's improving. And although the delivery of service is different, ultimately we're delivering more services just in a different way.
I love that. All right, Alexis, why don't you pop your camera on? We're going to go to you next. Say hello again.
Hi.
So,
I had to
so
my
when we talked, oops, sorry. So when we talked, I was extremely excited about how you talked about something called threshold philosophy and your tiered throttle intake approach. It's just fun to say. So
Yeah,
talk
great.
about it.
Sure. One of the things that our team, and I've really tried to, and I think this is important for everybody, is don't try to sit in a room by yourself and make these decisions. Engage your team. I think that everybody is having thoughts right now. You know, what is this going to look like? So engage your team. So we got together via a virtual, you know, team meeting, and we started talking about, okay, so if we're saying we're not going to go back to how it was before, right? That's the goal. We're not going to go back to that capacity crunch where every day you're like, we're out of space and you're freaking out. So we started looking at, okay, great. Well, how do we do that though? We can't just arbitrarily say no, because there's always going to be an emergency case coming in. So what we need to start doing is having this expand and contract model of taking in different categories of pets based on how much capacity we have at that time. And I say that because right now, and I think most places have fixed intake policies, right? You're like, oh, owner surrenders we do by appointment, strays we always take. We don't pick up cats, like at least we don't with our field department. You know, we have these fixed policies that aren't reflective of the sort of changing nature of our industry. So we all know that there's cat season. So there's periods of time in the year where I have plenty of space in my cat area. So I can expand what that looks like. So Andy, if it's possible for you to pull up this tiered chart that my team has been working on, I'll kind of show everybody. Sorry that the writing's small, but we did it in this target way, because ultimately what you see in the center always and immediately, tier one intakes are always going to be, I'm sorry, I'm going to lean in because it's tiny, pets, life's in danger, so your medical emergency, or a pet is a public safety risk. But then we looked at a tier two. So let's say we're at a 90% capacity. And the way we're looking at that is we basically count every kennel as a single kennel, not for co-housing. And we look at how many we have available when we drop that 90%. So like, for example, for cats, I know that 8 empty kennels is 10% of my cat capacity. So if I am at 80%, I have 16 open. So we're looking at how many open in case, you know, we have animals coming in. So when I get to that, you can see dog kennels at 90%. So that means I'm 90% full. I still have about 20 open kennels at this point, but I'm still going to take those returns when we haven't been able to find an alternate solution. I'm still going to take a dangerous dog in that has to, under ordinance, you know, it's not an emergency, but it has to, under ordinance, be quarantined for the court proceedings. You know, a stray that has non-life-threatening injuries, but there are medical needs that need to happen. And then a stray confined. So that might be, you know, it's in somebody's yard, and so it doesn't have access to food or things like that. And then you go to the next tier. So that's at my 75%, and then a 60% and a 50%. And the idea being that based on capacity, this circle expands and contracts daily. And our goal is to make this a publicly shareable document. So let's every day let our community know where our capacity is, right? Like, let's tell them based on that capacity, this is who I can take today. So there's no surprises when intake opens. So that there's no questions about why did they say no to this pet? Well, because we've tiered it about who needs to be here and who doesn't. And then the alternate solution for all of those other categories. So let's say we're at that, you know, tighter circle there. The alternate solution for the other ones are foster finders, like Scott was just talking about. You found this dog, can you keep it for a while and try to find, you know, either an alternate home or its original owner. But so basically looking at those alternate intervention solutions for all the categories that you can't fit in physically into the shelter at this time. And our hope is that we won't even have to be at these points, because those solutions will be so ingrained in our community that people will be used to that.
That's awesome. And so what other programming changes? Well, show the cats real quick. I know you have a cat one.
Just for the cat one real quick, if Andy can flip to that, we only had 4 tiers there when we looked at it. But I think one of the interesting things that you can see that we put on there is that our tier 2 includes community cats. And the reason being is, you know, one of the things that I've learned through the years attending these conferences and talking to people is our goal is not to be an adoption agency. That's not why we exist. Our goal is to solve a problem. Well, community cats, that's an easy problem to solve. We have a fixed period of time, they're going to get fixed, and they have an outcome already. So there's no reason that we shouldn't keep them higher up on our tier list, because we know that we can fix them and get them back out. They're not going to sit in a long period of time and face those shelter stress things like Scott was talking about. So community cats are pretty high on our list. And again, that goes back to that community resource model. We want to keep doing that and stop doing the things that we don't need to be doing.
Okay. And so what other programming changes are you making?
Yeah. So that's when we talk about, like, why does our intake policy have to be set in stone, right? But again, we're still going to need to do other things for the animals that do come to the shelter. So that expanded foster program. I think most shelters that really dug into that can say that they had great success. I mean, we had like a 265% increase in the number of adult dogs that went to foster. And just like Scott said, we're not seeing them come back to the shelter. At least 50% are becoming quote unquote foster failures, and the fosters are adopting, but the rest are either finding their own adopters or using online inquiries from us. And we're doing exactly what Scott said. We're serving as that meeting spot for that meet and greet to happen, or we recommend they go to a local park if the park's open. So we're seeing that same success. We've also talked about, we've been doing adoptions by appointment, and we're talking about keeping that because our staff has given us such great feedback about the fact that they feel like they get to really have the kind of adoption counseling that you can't have in a free-for-all Saturday, you know, when your lobby is just wall-to-wall people and there's people there picking up and there's people there looking for this. So this adoption by appointment has really enabled us to give more effective customer service, better than we ever have before. So we're looking at how we can at least integrate that where maybe people have a choice, you know, just like a restaurant. You could make a reservation or you can walk up and wait and see if there's a table available. So maybe we can have both of those things going simultaneously based on the experience that the citizen is looking for. And then lastly, our food pantry. You can see in that picture there on our screen, we really ramped up this pet food pantry to help people who had income loss due to COVID. The amount of, and I just want to be very clear, that's our Sally Port. It is wall to wall full of food. We spent $0 of taxpayer dollars of any of our operating budget, not a penny, because the donations, I mean, literally Amazon trucks were like lining up coming into our parking lot, because if you ask, people will help, and people love to give to something like that to help a pet stay in a home. So we really have, our team has loved being a part of this. We do it both with pickups, and our officers are doing deliveries to people's homes. It has been such a great community engagement program that we're absolutely going to keep that rolling in mass moving forward.
Well, you mentioned your field officers because you have changed their designation, haven't you? What are you calling them now?
Yeah, so we haven't changed all of them, but we've basically subdivided, and we've created a subgroup of officers. They're still animal control officers, but they're now focused on community resource. They're called community resource officers. Right. And we already had that in the works, but this whole thing has just further reaffirmed why it's the best thing we could do. So the idea being is that, you know, we're still going to have patrol officers that go out on first visit, but these community resource officers, they'll be the ones going and managing the follow-up of spay, neuter, and providing food assistance. Is your fence damaged? Can I help you fix it so your dog stops getting loose all the time? How can I connect you to resources? And so by making that pivot less from animal control to being a community resource, I think that we're going to find that, that the problems that we have seen with repeat offenders start to really decrease when they start to feel like we're a partner. And then, like Scott mentioned, again, I can't say strongly enough about return to owner in field. I have had my team doing so much training, getting on calls with Dallas Animal Services, who is really, you know, the gold standard for return to owner in the field with their team. We know, data tells us that keeping a pet in its neighborhood greatly increases the chances that it's going to go back home if it has a home. In fact, I think Austin did a study and they said like the return rate's over 50% if they stay in the neighborhood versus coming to the shelter, which is an average of about a 10% return to owner rate. Yeah. And I can say geographically that holds so true in Memphis. Our shelter's kind of like out off the edge of the city, like in an industrial cove. Like this is not a convenient place for people to get to. Particularly, we have a high poverty rate. They don't have access to transportation to come reclaim their dog. So by keeping the pet in the neighborhood, we're hopefully keeping these families together and reducing the number of pets that end up needing to come to the shelter in the first place.
So what's your sales pitch for this programmatic change?
Yeah.
You're standing in front of your city council. What's the sales pitch?
Yeah, so I think this is hard for everybody, right? And I've been thinking about it, and I'm sure everybody's brain, because there's something that's so ingrained about this idea of animal control, pick up the stray dog, animal control, pick up the stray dog. I mean, it's even, you know, in all the Disney movies that are out there. But I think what we've got to remember is that we have been offering an outdated and ineffective solution since the dawn of time. And the analogy or the example that I use for that is here in Memphis, our highest intake zip code is 38127. That's Fraser. That is a neighborhood. So for as long as time has existed, we've been picking up more dogs out of 38127 than anywhere else. Well, guess what? We're still picking up more dogs out of 38127 than anywhere else. So what does that tell me? Definition of insanity. We have done nothing to address the root problem, and all we're doing is throwing a solution, an expensive solution, at a problem, and it's not the solution. You know, it's the placebo instead of the vaccine, or the placebo instead of the drug. So what is the drug? The drug is going in and actually addressing the problem before it starts. Now, I caveat by saying when I have that discussion, when I talk that way, that's macro level, right? That's the big picture. And it changes when you have a single citizen calling you about that dog right in their street, right? Because they want a micro level solution. And I'm talking about the overwhelming nature of the problem in many years. You know, they don't want to hear that, right? So I think that's one of the important reasons why, and I think they'll be able to access in the toolkit those tiered charts that we put together. Stray habitual is different than just a stray roaming dog. And by that, I mean, we're going to call, we're not going to go on a stray roam. We're going to call and say, is this the first time you've seen this dog? How often is this? What is the problem? Do you have any idea if it has a home? And so we're going to segment out, is this a one-time issue, or is this a dog that is a constant habitual problem that maybe does require intervention by us? And so I think that's the solution. That's the sales pitch to your individuals, is we're just not going to come out without getting some more information. We need to learn more about this problem so we can address it correctly, not just address it the way we've always done it.
I love that. And so I'm sure you have some fears, right? Through some of these changes.
Yeah,
so what are
I mean,
your fears? Like, what's the fear?
I laugh because I'm terrified, and I'm guessing most people on this call are. I mean, I feel like what a weight that is on our shoulders right now, right? Like, this is perhaps the biggest single shift in animal welfare history that any of us will see in our lifetimes. And here many of us are sitting in the driver's seats, and people are looking to us at the local level to make the right decisions, right? To make the right call. But you know, I think the really important points that we have to stick with as a community are, one, there is strength in numbers and national backing. So I commend Best Friends for leading the charge on this. NACA, gosh, what a position that they took, that we could all ride behind, that we could all jump on that and give to our leaders about, we're going to emergency only intake. I mean, if you had tried to do that as an isolated agency, I think that nobody would have had success. So there's that unity across the country that has been huge. And I think that needs to continue. We need to all continue sharing what's happening in other communities. And that government officials love that. They love to hear that another city did something and they want to copy it. I think that reminding people that we have not been good stewards of their taxpayer dollars. And that's what I keep coming back to is, gosh, the amount of money I spend on every dog coming into the shelter, it is exorbitant. And there's a better way to spend that money that is going to have a bigger impact for our citizens, which I think is what our city council and our leaders want to hear. And then lastly, I would just say, give yourself a break, right? Like, these are uncharted waters, and don't beat yourself up too bad. I think I was telling you, McKenna, I love the phrase, and I tell my team all the time, better is better. So like, if you were training to run a marathon and you're trying to run 26 miles and you beat yourself up from day one because you struggled with 1 mile or 2, you are never going to get to 26. You have to celebrate your incremental success and say, I'm better today than I was yesterday. So try these ideas. I mean, even since we talked, another crazy idea that we're batting around is, what if we stopped doing stray intake at the shelter, period? What if we just didn't do it? What if we said, you pick up a stray, like, you know, because it's a citizen who obviously felt comfortable enough to put the dog in their car and drive all the way out to us. What if you don't come to the shelter? What if we ask you to take that pet home? we'll have an officer come get it, but not immediately. And then we'll talk to you about alternate solutions. And what if we stop using that stray intake office and having that line of people standing outside with the stray dogs? Just we're trying to throw everything at the wall and see what works. And I think that some things aren't going to work. Some things are going to work great. Some things are going to need to be tweaked over time. But it's that engagement and that willingness to look forward that I think is what our community expects from us right now, and I think is going to be the game changer.
So I have a question in the question thing that I think you'll know how to answer this. So
Okay.
I'll try and squish it down a little bit, so to speak. So most of the pushback this person gets is from is on shelter programs like managed intake, right? And it sounds like individual rescuers and private rescue organizations are the ones giving them the most trouble, but they're trying to provide guidance to the public. How do you address these ideas effectively with animal welfare groups and volunteers who are so resistant?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that same thing, and I'm sure Scott can probably weigh in on this too. From our advisory board, who, we've been doing managed intake, owner surrender appointments since 2017. And in December, my advisory board said, we want you to stop doing this. And I said, you know what? Let me write up some data that shows you what we're doing. And I think that that's the answer is, well, there's two answers. One is give data to the people who will accept it. How are you doing follow-up calls? Did people successfully rehome on their own? What do those statistics look like? How have you been able to save more pets because of it? How many have you kept in home? So use the data. But I'm going to be real honest with you. If someone is unwilling to come to a place of reason or compromise, then you probably have a better place you need to spend your time than trying to convince them. And that's a hard lesson for me, because I don't know, I'm some personality type where I want people to like me and think I'm doing a good job.
No,
but
I'm the same way.
yeah, but there's going to be some people out there that reason is not going to work. There are some people that there is no amount of explaining or justification that is ever going to align them with your position. And so I think it's finding a way to amicably agree to disagree and say, I respect your opinion, but ultimately I'm the one who's been selected for this role. And if you feel that my position or the policies under which I have operated our shelter are ill-advised, you're certainly welcome to go to my superior and make a recommendation that I'm replaced. But I think you have to not have fear of that. You have to not have fear that you could be replaced, or that because ultimately I think your boss has confidence in you if you have confidence in yourself. Sorry, I have a visitor.
No, I love the dog. Mine was barking in the background. Anyway, so I'm going to ask both you and Scott both this question. So what has been your aha moment through this whole situation? You want to go ahead first, Scott?
Sure. So my big aha moment is when you look at the fact that we have taken in 2,000 less animals since the start of this crisis, is where are these hundreds, if not thousands, of stray animals that have been coming over the counter? Are they really stray animals? Are these just people who have been embarrassed to tell us that they're bringing in their animals? And if they don't have the alternative to bring them in, are they going to be let out and run over by cars and all these crazy things everybody says will happen? Well, guess what? It's not happening. And people are way more receptive when you say, hey, would you mind keeping that stray? Then, all right, an officer will be out there in 15 minutes to get it. And I think I'm just so excited that the community is willing to do way more than we ever asked them to do.
What about you, Alexis? What's been your aha moment through this?
That there is a world in animal welfare where we don't have to live in a constant state of panic and crisis. Yeah. I think that we had all sort of accepted this normal life of insanity in the municipal shelter world, where it was like, every day, like, gear up before you walk in the door, because it's going to be a crisis and you are going to be fighting for every last kennel, and you are going to be beg, borrow, plead, and steal to not have to euthanize a large breed adult dog today. And oh gosh, the officers are out on a big call, just that state of constant crisis and panic that our team lived in. And so seeing that now we can operate like this, and it doesn't make us lazy. It doesn't mean we want to do less work. We just don't want to have to do as much. And it doesn't make us less productive. It makes us more responsible from a life-saving perspective. It makes us more responsible from a fiscal perspective for taxpayers. And it gives us an opportunity to maybe finally do the one thing that is actually going to fix this problem, which is not putting animals into kennels. It is helping people with animals at their homes. And so that new state of emotional health has kind of been my aha moment. I see it on my team. I see that my team feels better about coming to work, even through a pandemic. Like, the rest of the world is in straight panic mode, and my team's like, wow, this is so nice. What a nice, refreshing change to be able to get to know all the dogs and spend time with them. And so I think that that's really been my aha moment, is that you can get out of crisis mode. It's okay, and it's okay for that to be what it is from now on.
So there's a bunch of questions that I'm definitely going to get to, everybody, I promise. But we talked a lot about foster care. So before we go into all the questions, we want to make sure that everyone's aware of a really cool resource. It's 3 resources that you can give your fosters, and it's an access to a free veterinarian care telemedicine app. It is our vet. I'm going to mispronounce it, but anyway, it's through Best Friends. It's through this COVID-19, and it allows your foster care providers to access a vet off hours. So instead of getting that 2 o'clock in the morning call, right? We've all had that. They can actually go online through their app and access a vet directly to get advice and help. So to get to it, we're going to put the link into our chat. It's Vet Access. And it's at network.bestfriends.org/BFVA Foster. And so we do encourage everyone to go take a look at that during this COVID-19 crisis. It's free for you and your foster providers, and it's a great resource. So please enroll. So let's go ahead and jump into some of these questions. So one more question. So I'm hearing that, maybe some organizations out there may say to themselves, our community is different. The public won't step up and help. So Alexis, what do you say to that? Like, when you hear those type of comments?
I've been trained by Best Friends by attending all of the conferences that's not true. Because that is a standard line. I'm a good student. I'm a good soldier. But that has been debunked. And that's one of the great things, again, about these kinds of experiences and the networking of Best Friends and going to the conferences, is that you really get to see that, no, you are no different than any other city in the country. You're just not different. Now, maybe there's sort of a southern versus northern disparity in overpopulation, but generally there are other places dealing with the same thing as you. And so I would say, throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. Like, if you don't think your community will do it, what have you got to lose? I mean, if they don't do it, then you've just proven your own theory, and you can write back to McKenna Y at Best Friend and tell her
that's wrong.
That was wrong. But no, I mean, what have you got to lose? One thing, I can think of 2 specific examples. One, of course, being this, but another being, we had a big German Shepherd hoarding case, 40 German Shepherds in deplorable conditions. I didn't have an open kennel in my building. My team came in, we were there all night trying to double side kennels and figure it out. And so we went straight to the media the next day. And not only did we not have to euthanize any animals when we were now 40 large dogs over capacity, but we like cleared out an entire kennel room because the community just came out in droves. So I think that you have to ask, build those traditional media contacts, get on social media, and just go to everybody and say, can you help? And here's the help I need. And I'm asking because it's serious. Throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. I really think that every community in America will step up. You just have to give them a chance to, and you have to ask them to.
So Scott, we're getting a question about whether or not you worked with any volunteers in any new ways through this.
So we've been addressing what we kind of consider to be the new role of a volunteer, because we don't have as many animals in-house, and they don't have to walk the animals, and some of those traditional volunteer jobs. And I just met with my volunteer team via a virtual meeting a couple days ago, and I said, we've got to start thinking about being a volunteer might mean you never step foot inside this building again, that your volunteer work is done in the community, that your volunteer work is done over the phone, or if you're comfortable, you'll go meet with an owner in their home, or you'll meet at a neutral site. That you just have to rethink what the role of a volunteer is. I think the vast majority of my volunteers thought, wow, what a new opportunity to make a bigger difference. And so I think sometimes you just have to say, sorry, that one doesn't exist anymore, but boy, look at all these great new opportunities that you're going to have.
I love that. So are you anticipating any increase in intake with the expected economic downturn is the question we're getting. Scott, do you want to answer that real quick since you were just talking about?
So I don't really think so. I think, we have to continue to take the goodwill of this community, just as much as they're concerned about COVID, they should be concerned about their neighbors, they should be concerned. And part of it is we have to stop the mentality that we're the be all end all for everything. And when someone just wants to dump their animal on us, they get to. We have to let them know, we're a great resource and we can help you, but that help very likely will not be bringing that animal into us. So let's sit down and talk about it, and let's try to figure out what works for all of us and how you can be a temporary role in it, you can be a long-term role in it, and you might just be that temporary, hey, we're going to get someone else to come get that animal from you, but it's still not coming into our shelter. So I think we've got to get them to think, we're here for you. I hate to use this analogy, but I think it's the one that we're going to really be talking about over time, which is for those of us that are really old, we remember child orphanages. And what is a shelter other than a pet orphanage? And we don't take kids in and shove them in orphanages. We try to find guardians ad litem. We try to find foster care. We try to find someone in the community who's going to help the other people in our community. We're only asking the same thing for pets.
I love that. And Alexis, do you have anything to add about the fear of additional intake?
I think everything Scott said, and I use that analogy too about the DCS, the children in foster care, and that we made that shift. But I would say that, the entry point that we've been able to make with the pet food pantry has been really critical. I think we've served over 300 families so far, helped over 700 pets. But what's been great is we haven't said, here's your pet food, see ya. Is there anything else that you're struggling with right now? And we've sought out donations to provide, medical care for people if they need it. We've even helped pay for some temporary boarding if people were having some housing instability. So it's using whatever, the pet food pantry for us has been sort of an entry into how can we be, like Scott said, your caseworker to keep your pet in home. And I think that this relationship is so new to so many people. Like, they're just not used to it not being, oh, you're an officer, you're mad at me, you're animal control. No, you just want to help me, like, no questions asked. what a great new model of how we interface with the community. And I think that we haven't seen any uptick at all in a request for owner surrenders because we've been providing robust alternative resources.
Okay, I'm trying to go through some questions here. So let's see. Alexis, this is for you. Does Alexis deal with a central call intake, like a 311, like hotline type situation? And does she have faith that they will accurately assess the needs and ask more questions?
Yes, so we do, we have our officers dispatched through our police communications team. So people call 545 cops. If they call 311, then they get transferred there if it's an animal related call. And basically, because we want that in-house, that conversation like you're talking about, we say just put it in. We have, from a workflow, we've told those police dispatchers, just put in that stray roam call, get the caller's info and things like that, and it'll automatically prioritize it. And then we're allocating our officers, especially during this time where, you know, we've gone to emergency intake only. Instead of using your car, you're using your phone. You have a city issued phone, call, talk to the person. So we still want that call captured. We still want that coming in through dispatch because we want a record that we resolved it or we attempted to resolve it, but we just may be resolving it with our telephone instead of our animal control vehicle. So I haven't worried too much about that because I just want them to be a data entry capturer. We'll handle the conversations on the back end.
Okay, so Scott, this one's for you. Have you had any pushback from staff in regards to the changes? And if you did, how did you handle that?
I think whenever you make dramatic changes, there are people who don't like change and they push back. And I think it all depends on how you present it, how you feel. You know, I tend to be enthusiastic about change. I've been challenging my staff for years with a crazy idea and how do we get it to work. But the conversation I ultimately had the other day with my supervisory staff, and this will roll out to my rank and file staff very shortly, is I'm sorry that the job has changed so much from when you were first hired, but if you cannot make the transition to this new model, we can help transition you to another county job.
Yeah.
So it's one person asked, Scott, you specifically in regards to potential budget cuts. Are you concerned about any of your budget being cut that you were talking about how you reallocated some of the funds to cover some new programs? Do you have any fears around that?
One of the big conversations that I have had with my county administrator is exactly that. As we're right in the heart of heading into our next budget cycle, and we do 2-year budget cycles. So, you know, this is going to be a new 2-year one right on the cusp of this COVID situation. And the discussion of, yes, we may not be spending that money cleaning cages, but that money can be reinvested in other ways. And I have a finance undergraduate background, and to try to show the return on investment, you know, that's the one thing that most animal agencies don't really tell their community is for every animal that's adopted or placed in your community, it's thousands of dollars worth of vet bills, pet stores, toys, pet sitters, resorts. And when you start calculating that math out, for every dollar that's invested in our agency, it's probably close to $50 or $60 going back into the community. So why would you want to cut our budget when you're getting such a good bang for your buck? We just need to change where that money goes. And a dollar spent today is going to save you $4 or $5 spent tomorrow, because we're not going to put a Band-Aid on. We're going to fix it, and it won't, these people won't come back again because it's fixed.
I love that. Alexis, do you have any fears around the budget cuts?
Yeah, I mean, they're going through budget hearings right now, and I think that there's, you know, this big scary conversation about like what will the CARES Act cover, and because obviously every community is dealing with lost sales tax revenue, and that's a big part of our operating budget. So yeah, I mean, there's sort of some conversations that I'm not, right in on about the big picture and how the CARES Act. But luckily, I feel like I have a pretty supportive leadership team. And like to Scott's point, is make the case. Like I've made the case for, here's how our productivity was when the budget was this, here's what it is now, that we are, per animal served, leaner than we were. And so I think that you can continue saying per animal served, and you don't have to say if that animal was served in the shelter or if it was served in its own home. Like Scott said, per animal served, we're spending this much. And I've totally just stolen this idea that he just brought up about what that economic impact of pet ownership is, because I didn't think about how I was helping the economy, but now I am totally thinking about that. So everybody write that down. That was really, really a good idea.
So one of the questions we're getting is, what kind of veterinary services do you provide to at-risk customers, amputations, pyometra, others? Do you all have medical, I don't even know, do you all have spay, neuter, and medical services within your facility? You do. Alexis does.
Yeah,
Yes,
I have 2 full-time vets and a vet team. But their focus just from a capacity standpoint is on, in shelter pets. And so what we've really tried to do is use grant funding and donations for kind of outside medical services for owner surrender prevention. So we've built relationships with area veterinary clinics in different neighborhoods, trying to sort of strategically target geographically around the city. And so let's say somebody, we've had, my old dog has like a tumor, and they need to have it removed and I can't afford it. And it's affecting, quality of life. It's not just an unsightly tumor. Well, we'll pay for them to get that done at an outside clinic at a reduced rate from that. But again, the exciting thing about this is, if all of a sudden your population is significantly lower, the capacity in our clinic to be able to start bringing some of those services in-house. And of course, that's going to be a cost savings because we're not going to be paying any form of retail. So, so my hope is that we will be doing more external veterinary services moving forward.
So I have a really large staff, but to kind of put in perspective, our county geographically is the size of the state of Delaware. So we have 5 veterinarians and about 20 vet techs, and then additional vet assistant support staff that also works in the kennel. A lot of that had been supporting the 17,000 plus adoptions we had done a year that had to be sterilized and taken care of. But now that we're not bringing them in, we're thinking, first level is going to be helping rescues and foster, but does that not make available the possibility of helping the public as well? And in the state of Florida, we are licensed as a full veterinary facility. So there's nothing that prohibits us from doing work for the public. We simply have chosen not to. But this will be a surprise to a lot of people because everyone's going to hear it here for the first time other than my staff. We are tearing out all of our cat stray housing, and we're trying to double the size of our veterinary suite so that we can have exam rooms and things like that. So when rescues and the public come in, we're able to address it. So we have really gone to, there may be no way to go back to the way it used to be because we're repurposing that part of the shelter as we speak.
That's the way to get it to happen, right?
That's one way to get buy-in, McKenna. Maybe that's what we should all do. Just start tearing walls down and be like, what do you want me to do?
Just rip out the cages. They're no place to put them.
Yeah.
Well, we are at time. Oh, I'm so thankful for you guys for coming on and doing this. There's a few more questions, but the overall feeling I'm getting towards the end is everybody wants to reach out to you, Scott, about your modeling in regards to how you're going to pitch this to your county manager. And Alexa, everyone's thanking you for your wonderful "better is better" quote, was just perfect. So thank you guys. And this recording will be up on our website, the network.bestfriends.org. And I'm sure we'll have the contact information so people can reach out to Alexis and Scott directly. So have a good night. Thank you so much. See ya.
Thank you all.
Thank you.